My family and I live throughout the middle of Georgia. Not many stories come out of this area, and this one I'm about to share makes us glad of that fact. My cousin, who I'll call Bob, has been a police officer for 5 years. He went into the force bright-eyed and optimistic, I guess like so many do. It sounds corny, but he genuinely wanted to make a difference and help improve the lives of the people in his community. One day, they got an alert from a house somewhere between Macon and Roberta. To hear Bob tell it, it was a place that people had thought was abandoned for years. Gives you an idea of the state the house was in. Anyway, when they arrived, an older gentleman was sitting on the steps outside the front door with his hand in his pockets. Bob and the other officer approached him and were alarmed to see that the man was crying. Well, not crying really, but sobbing, and he was also muttering something to himself about how awful it is. They tried to question the man, but the guy was completely incoherent. It didn't take but a couple of seconds to figure out that the poor guy was traumatized. As his partner called for another car, Bob drew his gun and decided to enter the house. The smell inside the house was overpoweringly rancid. He told me that the kitchen and living room were a total wreck. It was clear the owners of the house were hoarders. Pots and pans stacked damn near to the ceiling, spoiled food all over the table, takeout containers scattered all over the floor. Disgusting. As procedure dictates, Bob called out to see if anyone would answer. Silence. He told me that even with all his training and experience over those past 5 years, his heart rate was already building fast. Gun at the ready, he checked out the living room and saw nobody was there either. He made his way down the hall where the smell was getting much worse. Just as it all became too much, he covered his mouth and nose and opened the door to what he suspected was the bedroom. In the bed were 2 corpses, gray-skinned and covered with flies. Despite his churning stomach, Bob decided to go in for a closer look, a decision he said he's regretted since. One of the corpses was male, the other female. The skin on their faces was already starting to fall off, and the flies were flying in and out of their mouths. Some were landing and sitting on their eyeballs. As Bob inspected the female's corpse, he was horrified to find that she was holding an even smaller dead body, an infant. It wasn't until a large cockroach crawled out of the dead infant's mouth that Bob ran outside the house, doubled over, and threw up his lunch all over the steps the man had been sitting on. When the other cars finally arrived, they were able to do a more thorough inspection. The older man that Bob and his partner had met when they first arrived was a former coworker and friend of the dead man. They'd worked together at a peach packing company. The man hadn't showed up for over a week, and he'd gone to their house to see if he was okay. The poor man had been the first to see that horrible sight in the bedroom. The story that they put together was that the wife and husband had at some point become addicted to opioids. After some kind of operation a year or so before, they had started abusing painkillers together, and the addiction grew and grew until they started shooting up and snorting heroin. Their daughter, who wasn't more than a couple years old, had died of neglect. When the husband and wife discovered their baby's corpse, they finally broke completely and decided to end themselves. The coroner found enough heroin in both their bodies to kill them twice over. Bob's still on the force, but he started drinking a little too much after that. He's been going to therapy, and he's since managed to get his drinking under control. But almost every time we talk, he says that he still has nightmares about that poor child's corpse. And in his nightmares, the baby's still crying,